Liam of Carcanne. Chapter 7. Adventure. Part 2. Exiting the tent into the darkness of the early morning, Liam felt better rested than he had since leaving California. There were no strange aches or pains from sleeping on something wrong, no neck pain from the lack of a proper pillow. His whole being was reinvigorated and ready for whatever lay ahead of him. He couldn't deny that there really was something to all of this magic stuff. I wonder if there's a potion addiction problem in this world, he thought as he emerged from the tent. An endless sea of magically doped peasants, constantly taking sleeping potions so they can sleep after spending their day high on whatever would pass for an energy drink here. Liam was greeted by Otto and Nori, standing around a campfire with mugs in hand. The adventurers were both kitted out the way they had been when Liam first met them on the side of the western branch. Nori wore rough textured pants in olive green, with tarnished metal knee caps secured in place over the fabric, and calf-length brown boots over the trousers. A light, long-sleeved linen shirt lay hidden by a custom chest plate made from hardened leather scales. Sleeves of chainmail fell from his shoulders and clinked against steel elbow cops that capped off green leather vambraces, matching the chest piece. The arms ended in mail-backed fingerless gloves that carried on for an unknown distance under the vambraces. A short sword, simple in its design but well looked after, hung from his left side, with a slew of pouches full of herbs and other supplies ringing his waist. A light cotton undershirt stuck out from under Otto's trademark black jerkin made of thick, hardened cowhide. Embedded in the leather were scrollwork designs that looped in various patterns. Unlike his day's training in the courtyard, the jerkin was tied tight and worn properly instead of pulled over his head. Dark brown leather vambraces covered his forearms, and long fingered gloves with tight cuffs made his arms seem strangely elegant in the firelight. He wore dark brown canvas pants with short black leather boots that gave way to greaves of the same material as his vambraces. From his hip hung a quiver of arrows fetched in white feathers, with a short dagger in a sheath built into its leather. On his left side hung an arming sword with a spiked pommel and straight crossguards. Slung across his shoulders, a short, recurved bow held his calf-length brown coat snug to his body, its hood freely available for his use. The two looked like proper adventurers lifted straight from the chapters of Tolkien. It took Liam some effort to disgorge the notion of Aragorn and Faramir from his mind. As the three made small talk waiting for Astor to arrive, he couldn't help but feel like a child playing dress-up in his own ill-fitting outfit. Liam wore a dark green tunic over dark brown trousers cut to fit under his calf-length black boots. Over the top of the shirt was a used cuirass, worn and scuffed, made from thick leather left in its natural color, the back of which was missing and had been replaced by a sheet of chainmail that the armorer had tried to scrub the rust from before selling to him. His shoulders lay protected by both the leather of the rotund chest protector and its mail, but it had no sleeves to speak of. On his arms, he wore splinted vambraces that slid down his arms and allowed the metal splints to dig into his wrists. He had tried to cuff the extra length of his shirt around them, but it offered little protection. On his right hand, he wore a single leather glove, the cuff of which spread wide from his wrist and covered the first half-inch of the vambrace under it. The short sword Otto had given him hung from his left hip, and on his right was the small utility knife that had been included with the gift. "You just buy that?" Otto asked Liam as he acquired a mug from the fireside and poured himself some tea. "Before we left, yes." "It'll work." Nori walked over to him to get a better look. "Why only one glove?" "It came with the vambraces," Liam remarked, taking a sip of tea and holding his gloved hand out as if inspecting a fresh manicure. "But only one?" "The armorer was trying to upsell me. Kept insisting I wouldn't need the second glove if I bought a shield. When I didn't, he didn't offer the second glove." Liam looked across his mug at the two men before taking another drink. "Still, the rest of the kit looks decent enough," Nori nodded. "It'll keep you safe and still pretty mobile." He reached out and grabbed the chest piece by the shoulders and gave it a shake. It slid around Liam's body a bit but stayed on him. "Maybe get it resized when you get back to Stawson." "It's already been resized." Liam looked down at the armor. "For you?" "Yes, for me." "Oh. Well then," Nori turned and walked back to where he left his mug of tea. The small talk continued on until Astor arrived at camp, carrying a lantern and accompanied by two other large lumberjacks. Each of the men carried a large splitting maul over their shoulders and lanterns in their free hands. Liam quaffed down the hot liquid in his mug while the others set about dousing their fire. There was barely enough time to shove a piece of jerky in his mouth before following the men down the trail leading deeper into the woods. As they walked, they recapped the plan from the previous night while the two lumbermen followed, guarding their rear. Maybe it was that Astor thought they needed guards, or perhaps it was the foreboding nature of the dark woods. For the first time, Liam felt the weight of what it was the three men were setting out to do. Up until now, their adventure was little more than a road trip, with the dangerous part this nebulous thing that would be happening eventually. It seemed almost unreal, especially to Liam's modern mind. Yes, he had seen monsters. The Vargr still haunted his anxieties. He had been ambushed by thieves and tackled in a street brawl, but this was the first time that there was a quiet before the storm. The first time he had a chance to reflect on the fact he was actively walking into danger. It didn't seem to affect Otto and Nori. They carried on, the same as ever, pumping Astor for all the information he had. The foreman hadn't been nearly as talkative as he was the day before. With only the brooding attitude and nervous glances of the two lumbermen behind him, he thought he understood why. Hobgoblins. He shook his head at the ridiculousness of the thought. We're hunting hobgoblins. When the 6 men finally came to the clearing, Liam was surprised to see the dark blue of a sunless sky still above them. Smashed wooden planks, debris from work tables, and logs lay scattered all around the space. Along the edges of the woods, trees lay ripped from the ground, their root balls pulled up and exposed. 2 smaller paths branched from the far side of the clearing, one heading west towards the felling fields, and another south. "This is it," Astor said as he walked into the center of the open space. "We used to buckle logs here in the early days. Now it's... well, you can see for yourself." "You cleaned up after the attack?" Nori took in the damage from the center of the clearing with Astor. Despite the wanton destruction spread around the space, there was no sign of any bodies or human-crafted tools, save one, a lone hatchet, embedded deep in a tree about 10 feet in the air. "We gave the men a proper burial back at camp. No one's been back here since." "Only the bodies?" Otto asked from where he stooped to examine the broken edge of a table. "And their tools," Astor answered, his eyes moving around the edges of the clearing. "Nothing else, though." "All the tools but the axe," Liam corrected, standing at the foot of the tree and staring up at the tool. "You try to reach it," Astor snapped. Already, he was slowly shifting from foot to foot and wringing his hands. The 2 silent men who accompanied him were likewise showing signs of their growing trepidation at having to stay in this place. "He didn't mean anything by it," Nori reassured the foreman. "It does make you wonder how it got up there, though." "Hobgoblins must have thrown it," one of the men holding the lanterns mumbled as he adjusted his maul in one hand and the lantern in the other. "Hell of a throw," Liam said, taking his eyes off the embedded implement and turning back towards where Nori and Astor stood. "Look, if you don't need us for anything else," Astor kept his eyes on the edge of the forest, "we'll leave you to it and head back to camp." Nori looked to Otto, who gave him an almost imperceptible nod, and Nori released Astor and the others from their obligations. Quickly, the 3 men turned and fled the clearing at as quick a pace as their pride would allow them. "Wait, what about the lanterns?" Liam asked as Astor disappeared onto the path, leaving the 3 of them in the deep gloom of the woods. "We'll be better off without them," he heard Otto's voice say, only a few feet away from where he stood. "Give your eyes a couple of minutes to adjust, and we'll see well enough." "Or we could keep the lanterns and see perfectly." Liam hid his sigh. His nerves had already been churned up during the walk to the clearing. Now that they were alone and the darkness of the woods had flowed in to surround them, his nerves began playing hockey with his insides. "What did you find?" Nori asked the gloom. "Not much." Liam made out the faint outline of Otto moving closer to his partner's voice as he talked. The group that did the cleaning up must have been pretty big. There's been a lot of human traffic around here, but not down the paths branching out from here. "Astor said no one had come this far in since the cleanup crew left," Liam offered. "He did," Otto agreed, "but the traffic that was here had already done the damage. It's impossible to tell which way the attackers ran off." Otto shot a huff of annoyed air through his nose. "What really has me stumped, though, is the trees." "Is a bunch of fallen trees really that odd?" Liam asked. The surrounding clearing was slowly becoming brighter as his eyes adjusted. No, brighter wasn't the right term for it. Less dark? The longer he looked around the space, the more he felt he was being pulled from the pitch black of woods into a black and white film. "We are working for loggers, after all." "Not those trees." Otto's voice was judgmental. Unbeknownst to Liam, his lessons had already begun, and he had just failed the test. The ones with the roots still attached. Liam could just make out the shape of Nori's hand pointing to the edge of the clearing. Think it through. The lumbermen obviously didn't cut those down. Liam peered into the darkness, forcing his eyes to take in more of the faint light available to them. All he could make out were the dim outlines of standing tree trunks. It took a moment of concentrated effort before his mind was able to find shapes he could recognize in the darkness. Sure enough, on the base of several of the trees, he barely saw the large fan shapes of their roots still attached. Maybe it was some kind of trap? Liam proposed, carefully picking his way through the debris on the ground to get a better look at the trees. Those trees would have fallen pretty slowly. No self-respecting lumberjack would have been caught under them. Otto followed Liam's path to the edge of the woods and joined him in inspecting the trees. Then why push them over? Nori's voice hadn't moved from the center of the clearing. I don't know, Otto shrugged. I can't see a group of, anyone taking their time to push a tree over in the middle of a fight. Otto slowly picked his way back to where Nori was standing, leaving Liam alone to inspect the downed trees. Liam's eyes continued to adjust to the dim light. There was still no color available to him, but his immediate surroundings were coming more and more into focus. There's nothing here. No drop clubs, no arrows, nothing left behind by the Hobbs, Liam heard one of his mentors say as he stepped cautiously past the first row of downed trees. Navigating beyond the edge of the clearing in the dim light was a challenge. Still, Liam managed it without falling flat on his face. He couldn't have been more than 20 feet outside the boundary of the glade when he spotted the last of the fallen trees. As he walked to investigate it, his foot bounced against something on the ground and caused him to stumble. Looking to the ground, he spotted a branch laying across his path. His eyes drifted to the canopy where Liam found many of the branches overhead had been broken. Now he was beginning to understand why Otto had dismissed the lanterns. Without them, he didn't have to rely on the narrow sea of light they provided. Allowing his eyes to adjust to the dark left him able to see even more broken branches dangling from the trees, 2 and 3 rows beyond those closest to him. That's odd. Eyes staying trained on the broken twigs in the distance, he continued his path to the fallen tree. How did those get broke? Liam didn't get to finish his thought. Awestruck, he watched as the broken branches and twigs he had been looking at coalesced into an almost perfect halo 10 feet in diameter. Aligned perfectly behind the ring, a long tunnel of broken branches and twigs reached deeper into the woods. His eyes proved just sharp enough to spot where several trees had been stripped of their bark in patches as high as 8 feet in the air. The bright patches of exposed wood formed a twisting line through the woods as the tunnel meandered through the trees. Liam opened his mouth to yell for his friends, but his voice caught in his throat. This is what they had come to deal with? Killer beasts capable of pushing over trees and breaking a tunnel straight through the heart of these dense woods? Liam of Carcanne was written by Will Hansen. This chapter has been read for you by the author. If you've enjoyed this episode, why not leave a comment? I'd love to hear what you think. Likewise, every like, rating, and subscription helps. Liam of Carcanne is now available as a podcast on Spotify, Apple, Amazon, and all other major podcast distributors. Want more information on Liam or Will? Visit the Wooks Books YouTube channel, Facebook page, or website, all linked in the description. Thank you for listening, and I look forward to seeing you next time.